Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, we will have just a recap on the 4 responsibilities of business, which I discussed in the last class. A business should attend to these 4 responsibility. One is economic, second is legal, third is ethical, fourth is discretionary. Economic is something which a business must do. What do we understand by this? A company or an organization has to produce products, has to tap markets. These products should be acceptable in market, and it must raise revenue from the sale of these products. So, this is an economic activity. So, an economic activity invariably is connected with marketing, and this marketing an organization has to do to be in business. The second activity which we said an organization will have to do is legal. In order to do the economic activity, the organization should follow certain legal boundaries, that is, it must operate within certain legal boundaries. These are referred to as the legal responsibilities of the business, where you do business according to the law of the land. The third and the fourth one, they are grouped under what is called the corporate social responsibility. They come under the heads of ethical and discretionary. So, ethical is something which an organization should do. What are the components of ethical responsibility? It has got the components of utility, rights and justice. What is utility? Does it optimize the satisfaction of the stakeholders? That is, it should produce the greatest benefit to the society and least harm. The cost should be lowest. Then rights, does it respect the rights of the individuals involved? Justice, is it consistent with the canons of justice, that is, decision makers should be equitable, fair and impartial in the distribution of costs and benefits to individuals and society. In other words, what do we mean by this? A company should discharge its responsibility in an ethical manner. This ethical manner includes these components of utility, that is, you should be able to optimize the satisfaction of the stakeholders, and you should also respect the individual's rights, and you should also follow the canons of justice or the natural justice, which may say this is, you should be equitable, fair and impartial in the distribution of costs and benefits to individuals and society. So, this is what it is. So, in the last class I also told you that Indian companies by and large have to conform according to this legal framework. This legal framework is spelt out by the Indian Companies Act. And when we were discussing the board of directors, I said 3 sections of the Indian Companies Act are highly relevant for the BOD. One is section 291, second is section 292, third is section 293. So, in fact, we discussed all those things when we were discussing the BOD. So, the responsibilities of the business also stems from this BOD. The BOD should really come out with the responsibilities of the business and whatever has been spelled out in the act. So, if you really go back a little further, this sections 291 to 293, I have dealt with this in page number 38 of my book on strategic management. So, I am just reading from this book, page number 38. It also gives you some idea of what is the definition of the director, which I read with respect to the BOD. According to section 213(1) of the Indian Companies Act, the term director includes any person occupying the position of director. So, no particular definition. Similarly, the Indian Companies Act does not define the term board of directors. We can infer that the BOD is a group of persons, each of whom is a director. According to the present norms, the maximum number of directorships a person can hold is 20. According to section 269 of the Indian Companies Act, specified public companies or private companies which are subsidiaries of public companies shall have a managing director or a whole time director or manager, and each such appointment shall be made with the prior approval of the Government of India. Now, a small elaboration which I have already discussed with respect to the BOD, that is sections 291 to 293. The section 291 of the Indian Companies Act states that the BODs shall be entitled to do all such acts and things as the company is authorized to exercise and do, except those things that can be done in the annual general body meeting of the company, except what is required to be done, or where permission is sought to be obtained through the AGM only. Other things can be done through this section 291 by the BOD. Section 292 gives the exclusive powers of the BODs, which we have discussed. Section 293 gives the restrictions or lists the restrictions on the powers of the BOD in respect of selling, leasing and disposing of the company's property, remittance of debt due by any director, borrowing money to an extent which can exceed the net worth of the company, etc. In all these cases, the consent of the general body meeting of the company has to be obtained before initiating any action. So, suppose the director owes some money and the company wants to see that this money is reimbursed or is made good through the assets of the company. Can be done, provided the general body of the company approves the same. This is what section 293 of the Indian Companies Act lists. So, the 4 responsibilities of the business stemming out again. Now, read it in conjunction with the sections 291 to 293. What are the powers, what are the functions, and what are the restrictions on the board of directors. Read it in conjunction with this 291 to 293. It makes more sense, that is the responsibilities of the business as well as now the new terminology which almost all businesses are coining now, that is the corporate social responsibility, which essentially means or which essentially includes the ethical and the discretionary side of business. Now, why I said this corporate social responsibility which all companies are talking now? It is not that the Indian companies were not exhibiting these two aspects of business. They were exhibiting these aspects of business, that is the ethical responsibility as well as the discretionary responsibility, without perhaps being brought out in this outspoken manner. So, but there are case studies dating back to the 80s only, where Indian companies have really behaved in the most ethical and responsible manner. One such study I am presenting to you, which was really a study of one of the public sector companies of that time, that is the Indian Petrochemicals Limited. Now, it is taken over by Reliance. Now, this company, if you really see, was practicing the social audit in the mid 80s only. For the purposes of the social audit, it had divided its stakeholders into 4 groups. One is employees, second is the customers, third is the government, and fourth is the society. For each of these focus groups, these are called focus groups for social audit, a weightage of 25% was given for each group. So, employees got a weightage of 25%, customers got a weightage of 25%. Similarly, government and society also got a weightage of 25% each. Now, the slide that is presented to you gives you what are the factors and sub factors with respect to each of these 4. Take for example, the employees. What are the types of sub factors that are involved in this factor employees? If you see these factor employees, they are concerned with all these sub factors. One is salary and other benefits, organizational policies, working conditions, their growth prospects, the job satisfaction, then the employee-employer relationship. All these 6 factors which are sub factors which are listed can be put under 2 broad heads. One is the sub factor with respect to hygiene, the other is the sub factor with respect to satisfaction. So, what is the factor with respect, what are the sub factors with respect to satisfaction, job satisfaction, your employee-employer relationship, then the organizational policies, all these can be listed as satisfaction factors. Similarly, the other if you really see the other 2, that is the salary and the working conditions, the salary and other benefits, and the growth, they are all listed under hygiene factors. and each of them is given a weightage of 50% out of the 25% which is given, that is each of them get all the 3 put together get 12.5% okay, in total. Now, go to the next one, customers. What are the types of things, sub factors that are involved? We are looking at product development, we are looking at product attributes, we are looking at service attributes, and we are looking at promotion. So, suppose the customers itself we give it a 100% weightage, then all these 4 will get a weightage not 25-25, but product development and product attributes will get a slightly higher weightage, that is 30 and 30. Then promotion and service attributes will get a weightage of 20 and 20, totaling to 100, but actually 25% in effect. So, this will be the sub factors which you are looking at with respect to customers. Then what about the government? The sub factors which you may be looking at the government side would be the tax payment and dividends, the adherence to rules and regulations, and other conditions to economy. So, each of them, other conditions to economy is given a higher weightage because you are looking at what is happening to the GDP of the country, all those types of other aspects, what is happening to the industrial side of business, all that. So, given a higher weightage 50%, then tax payments and dividends 30, then adherence to rules and regulations 20, making a total of 100. Now, when you are looking at society, what could be the sub factors? So, you are looking at each quarter, first quarter, then what is the community welfare, what are the sub factors you can be looking at community welfare, then you can be looking at the rural development, you can be looking at the charities and relief measures. In other words, these are the things which I listed under the head of ethical and discretionary responsibility of business. That is, what is the company doing towards community welfare? So, take the first quarter results, what did he do? Similarly, what did he do for rural development? What do we mean by rural development? If you really see, the factory or the company or the organization can adopt certain villages surrounding the company and provide in those villages certain basic minimum facilities, can be good sanitation facilities, good development of roads and some basic essentials which are required for the rural masses. So, that is towards the rural development. And the third aspect which a company has to engage towards the discharge of social responsibilities is charities and relief measures. Sometimes the company might be some exigencies, some calamities in society, the company might be willing to respond or willing to really measure up to that situation by coming to the aid of people or the sections of society which might be affected. It can be floods, it can be earthquake or whatever, which the society which might be put to at large. So, these are the sides of business which the company has to look at with respect to society, the sub factors. Now, how did IPCL fare? So, when if you really see IPCL fared in 1987, it scored an overall corporate responsibility score of 6.125, on a scale of 10. What does that mean? It means that the company has behaved in a socially responsible manner. It is quite above average. So, considering that it was a public sector company, still the company adopted high standards of corporate social responsibility back in the 80s only. Now, we are only seeing heightened use of this term corporate social responsibility in almost every company forum. But this exercise of rating a company on the different groups, that is the stakeholders, was done back in the 80s only. In fact, at the initiative, an initiative of the students from IIM Ahmedabad. Now, with all this, we look at ethics and corporate governance. What does ethics mean? I am giving you a slightly better definition, or slightly, you can say, a broader definition. That is, business ethics is primarily concerned with the relationship of business goals and techniques to specifically human ends. What does it do? It studies the impact of actions or acts and decisions. That is, you act and there may be certain decision involved in that on the good of the individual, the business community and society as a whole. What do we normally understand by this term corporate governance? So, the corporate governance relates to the set of incentives, safeguards and dispute resolution process that is used to control and coordinate the actions of the agents on behalf of shareholders by board of directors. So, this is where the recap of this sections 291 to 293 becomes relevant. So, 291 BOD derives some powers, 293 the restrictions on the powers also comes in, that is the sections 291 to 293 of the Indian Companies Act. Now, the post liberalization era. In fact, on corporate governance, 4 committees were set up after this 1991 liberalization of the economy, and 4 committees have submitted their report. One is the Cadbury Committee report. These are all the initiatives of the government of India. Then the second is the CII Committee report. Third is the Kumar Mangalam Birla report, and the fourth is the Narayan Murthy Committee report. So, there are 4 reports, that is, one is the Cadbury Committee report, second is the CII Committee report, third is the Kumar Mangalam Birla report, and fourth is the Narayan Murthy Committee report. We will discuss very briefly what did each of these committees do. Cadbury Committee report. It was set up in 91 by the Financial Reporting Council of the London Stock Exchange. So, this was again, if you really go back, this cannot be termed as an initiative of the government. So, in fact, we have to look at both Cadbury Committee report, the CII Committee report as an initiative of the industry, but perhaps with the tacit approval of the government of India. So, if you really see, this committee was set up in 91 by the Financial Reporting Council of the London Stock Exchange. So, looked at the financial aspects of corporate performance. So, what did it do? What is the type of recommendation? Some two recommendations, important recommendations. A single person should not be vested with the decision making power. That is, do not combine the power in one person only, according to this committee. That is, the roles of chairman and chief executive should be separated clearly. So, this is one of the recommendations, important recommendations of this committee. Then the second one, a majority of directors should be independent non-executive directors. They should act independently and should not have any financial interest in the company. So, the belief is that if they are non-executive directors, they can take an objective view of the situation. Compared to this, the CII, that is the Confederation of Indian Industry, it drafted some codes of corporate governance in 96. So, what are the types of all this result was due to the result of growing international competition, growth in the economy, as well as the scams and frauds that surfaced. All this resulted in the CII committee, CII setting up a committee for this corporate governance in 96. So, what is the type of major recommendations this committee gave? It listed companies with a turnover of at least 100 crores and a paid up capital of at least 20 crores must appoint audit committees of the board within 2 years. That is, listed companies with a turnover of at least 100 crores and a paid up capital of at least 20 crores must appoint audit committees of the board within 2 years. The non-executive directors should actively participate in board affairs and they should be adequately compensated through commissions and stock options. Now, this CII committee put one more restriction on the number of directorships. It said no person should hold directorships in more than 10 companies, whereas the Indian Companies Act allows you to go up to 20. It said okay, in order to do justice to the directorship, no more than 10. So, these are some of the major recommendations of the CII committee in 96. Now, the next one, that is the Kumar Mangalam Birla committee report. This was this is a initiative of the SEBI, that is the Securities and Exchange Board of India, set up in 99. So, what was the idea? The idea was to address the safeguards to be instituted within the company to deal with insider information and insider trading. So, so many stock exchange scams, that thing, this thing and all which surfaced. So, you had so many scams during this period of the early 90s and the mid 90s. So, this committee, that is a Kumar Mangalam Birla report, was basically entrusted the job by SEBI to address this question. What did it come out with? The board should have an optimum combination of executive and non-executive directors, and at least 50% should be non-executive directors. Again, an emphasis, have more non-executive directors, so that they can be impartial, they can have a more impartial view or an objective view of what is going on in the company, then board should set up a remuneration committee to determine the remuneration packages for the executives. So, there is now so many, sometimes a few months back perhaps, one of the ministers attached to the central government made one statement which was concerning the salaries of the executives in the private sector. So, he said they should not get these very high salaries. In fact, he used one terminology which was taken objection to. So, the point the minister was making was they should not be getting very high salaries when the other company executives, they are getting a certain level of salary. The level of salary which these senior people are getting in the company should not be exorbitantly high compared to these people. So, there must be certain times, not too many number of times. This is what he was trying to say. So, this is the management should assist the board in its decision making process in respect of company strategy, policy, code of conduct and performance targets. So, this is one more aspect which the company, which this Kumar Mangalam Birla report emphasized on. It said the top management of the company. In fact, this is what we discussed in the earlier classes. What does the top management of the company, what do we understand by this term top management of the company? The top management of the company is normally we can designate any person who is general manager and above in a company to form the top management of the company. In other words, they are the decision making persons in an organization. They are involved in active decision making process. So, if the process has to be initiated in the organization to take decisions. So, this is what we were talking of in the earlier classes, that is the strategic management decision making process. Who are all going to be involved? The top management of the company. What do we understand by the top management of the company? Any person who is holding the position of general manager and above in an organization can be considered as representing the top management of the company. So, what is the Birla committee, Kumar Mangalam Birla report saying? Management should assist the board in its decision making process in respect of company's strategy, policy, code of conduct and performance targets. The latest of these reports, committees and the reports on corporate governance. So, again the SEBI came into the picture. The SEBI had come into the picture with respect to the Kumar Mangalam Birla report in 99. Again it came in 2003, and when it instituted a committee under the chairmanship of Mr. Narayan Murthy, who was the chief of Infosys, and it submitted its final report in the year 2003. So, the idea was to raise the ethical standards of companies in India for good corporate governance. So, in other words, even an organization like SEBI started goading the Indian companies or the Indian corporates to behave in an ethical and a responsible manner, that is ethically responsible manner, and provide good corporate governance. That is, this is the thing. What is it? What did this committee do? It went into all aspects of this, the two aspects of business which I listed, that is the ethical aspect and the discretionary aspect, and made some important recommendations. What are the recommendations which were made? Board members should be informed about risk assessment and minimization procedures. What does this mean? What do we understand by this term risk assessment? Suppose a company has to invest certain money or make some portion of the resources of the company available for a certain project. It should be able to get a report from the executives of the company on the nature of risk involved with respect to committing these resources, whether the company can get back the resources committed, or in other words, what is the return on investment with respect to these resources which the company is committing towards a certain initiative. Will it pay back or will it not pay back? What is the probability that it will pay back during this particular period, or what is the probability it will not pay back? So, all these aspects of what do you call in the managerial terminology, you should do what is what we normally refer to as a Bayesian analysis of decision making. So, you analyze what is the what do you call the a priori probability of a certain action, then what is the post priori probability of a certain action, what is it going to result in. All this should be brought out by the risk assessment group. So, in fact, what it means is an organization, a good corporate should have a risk assessment, and it should help the board in knowing the risk that is involved with respect to each of its decisions. So, what do you mean by knowing the risk that is involved? What is the reason for that? So, the board can with its wisdom try to minimize this risk. So, it can say instead of committing this much of percentage of resources towards this action, why not commit a certain lower percentage. So, in other words, the board can with its extraordinary expertise available with the members, can always do a sort of a sensitivity analysis where it can come out with a decision saying this could be the method of minimizing the risk due to this particular action. Then all audit committee should be financially literate. That is, if you are a member of this audit committee, you should be able to understand what is this audit committee report, and at least one member should have accounting or related financial management expertise. So, one of the members of this audit committee should be a what do you call perhaps a certified chartered accountant or a cost accountant or whatever is required according to the Indian Companies Act. So, mere explanation of why as to why a company has followed a different accounting standards from the prescribed standards will not be sufficient. So, suppose the company has deviated, so it is not following the accepted accounting practice according to the Indian Companies Act. Why it has done so? Just suppose it just gives a simple explanation, that will not be sufficient. It has to provide a detailed note as to why this was required. So, for example, you take the case of Infosys only. It gives when it in its audit reports, there will be one report conforming according to the standards of accounting practices which are required from the Indian government, that is the Indian Companies Act. There is one more report which follows according to the accepted accounting practices as per the requirements in the United States, that is a gap. Okay. So, the company gives that report also, the company gives this report also. So, that what does it mean? That means the company's accounting transactions are very transparent. So, they say you have this side of conforming to the Indian Companies Act, this side according to the American audit standards. Now, that gives you an idea, or that gives you an understanding of the practices followed in the company, helps you to make considered decisions. So, this is being followed now by many companies which are operating in the software or the IT field. Now, by and large we have discussed what are all these CSR issues, what are these BODs, then we have looked at a company, that is IPL, which IPCL, which used to follow this social responsibility back in the mid 80s only. So, this is not something new for even a public sector company. Now, with all this, we move to one important aspect. Now, what are the changes which you can visualize in the 21st century? So, because this globalization becomes increasingly dominant, that is, companies want to become global. So, when they want to become global, what is it that is likely to happen? So, some of the things which are likely to happen or which can be visualized are these. One, as firms become increasingly global, BODs may need to become more international. What does it mean? Why should BODs become more international? The reason for this is that you may have international market segments. So, to cater to those international market segments or to bring business from these international market segments, it may be better that these constituencies are represented by persons who are more conversant with these market segments. Okay. So, if you look at a company like Infosys, it had a well known US senator on its board, and he still continues on the board of this company. So, what is the idea? The idea is the company is having a major business stake in the US market. It may be highly desirable to get authentic views of this market segment from people who are knowledgeable primarily of this particular segment. You have a primary knowledge of this market segment, okay, instead of relying on secondary sources of data. The second thing which can happen in this 21st century is BODs may have to consider the interests of all key stakeholders and not just who owns stock while taking strategic decisions. This is one more very important aspect. Let us say you are it is your own company and you hold, let us say, 85% or 90% of the shares of this company, and the remaining 10% or 15% are held by others. Now, when you are in this type of a scenario, who is the key stakeholder? It is you only. You are the key stakeholder. Now, suppose let us say your interests are satisfied, then is it enough? It is not enough, because you may be looking at issues in your narrow limited domain of how my share prices is going to increase. But there are so many stakeholders who are involved in the system other than you. They may be the one aspect is your other shareholders forming a small percentage of less than 15%. They are one part of that, but there are other stakeholders, that is other segments to which market segments to which the company is catering. All these are stakeholders for which the company is answerable or has a certain responsibility to fulfill. So, these are going to be more predominant. In other words, see, this is in a way, when the corporate shareholding is dispersed widely in the company, then the company's management, you can expect it to be more tending towards more democratic manner. Okay. So, because you are having large number of shareholders instead of one person, and then decisions may be more democratically taken, serving the interests of all the key stakeholders or all the constituencies. Then the third one, which is likely to have or which is likely to become dominant, is ability to articulate a strategic vision and motivate people to achieve it may become the most important characteristic required of a CEO. So, a CEO's role in the present changed context becomes extremely crucial. He should not be just some person who is sitting in the position of CEO. He should be a person who is articulate, who can articulate the strategic vision of the company, motivate the people to achieve that. That becomes a very important characteristic of the CEO. So, in other words, a CEO cannot be just an ornamental position. No, those days are likely to be goner type of days. Okay. So, this is how the if you really see, these are the types of issues which companies will have to tackle in the coming 21st centuries. This is more brought out or brought about due to this LPG era. This is, we are more concerned about the Indian companies, kindly note that. So, this is this LPG era, that is the liberalization, privatization and globalization, has made all these types of in a way very important changes in the Indian business scenario or the Indian business climate. It is visualizing these types of very important changes. Never did we visualize that in an Indian company there will be foreigners on the boards of Indian companies. We never, if you really go back some 20 years backwards or 15 years backwards also, we never visualized a scenario where there can be a foreigner on the board of directors of an Indian company. But now the situation has changed so much that you may require a foreigner or you may require a competent foreign person to really represent or take care of certain constituencies in your BOD. Similarly, you cannot have any person as the CEO of a company. You should be able to have an extremely competent person as the CEO of a company. Otherwise, in the present competitive market scenario, the company's interests will be drastically affected if you have a person who is not able to take or who is not able to really motivate his people to take these important decisions. So, these are the issues which are becoming highly critical in the present day setup. So, we will discuss in the next class. I will be discussing some questions which you would like to attempt on whatever we have covered till now. Perhaps except the social audit portion, we will try to I will try to list out some questions which you may like to answer as an assignment. Thank you.